Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Tyranny. It's the most hardcore news show on earth. Thank you for joining me on, forgot what day it is. It is Sunday, the 29th of September, and this is episode 95. This is a checkpoint, a tyranny checkpoint of sorts. It's more so of a check in. I'll also talk about the psychology of freedom. So we don't have a breaking news story like we did last week. It's more so of a check in. I like to do these every now and then. I'd rather talk about what I think is important more so than to force something that I don't have such a compelling, narrative or thing to say about it. Of course, we got Hurricane Helena, right? There's a lot of talk about possible geoengineering behind that. Let me just throw that out there, right, for YouTube. Other things going on with Iran. Okay, that's all happening, right? That's worth talking about. Sometimes I touch that, sometimes I don't. I want to check in and talk about our reality in general in 2024 as we're going into the fall now, right? Summer's over. I want to talk about where we are and then really to talk about our way of thinking and our emotions and the way that is the key to changing our lives. That sounds obvious, right? Like, it sounds obvious that our thoughts and emotions affect our life, but we think about physical actions and circumstances way more than we think about thoughts and emotions. But of course, those have to go together. They do go together. Before I get into that, what is life like today, right? So what am I talking about? I think it's really important, first of all, everybody's got to eat. So what is our so-called economic situation? Look, it costs more. We have higher costs. We have lower wages. I don't care what the wages are. It doesn't matter what they are. We have to work more for less due to inflation and economic policy and a whole lot of factors. The reality is, we're kind of in a rat race here in America where things are not as bad, and in the rest of the world, it's just hard to make a living. We got less nutrition in our food, right? So not only our money is worth less, even when we get the money to buy the food, we're getting, again, fewer resources. The food is less nutritious due to pesticides, our farming practices, mass agriculture, and then food processing. This extra processed food is, of course, causing all these chronic diseases. America is like the sickest nation on earth because of the chronic diseases we have, the obesity we have, more and more of this we have, right? Not to mention autoimmune diseases, things like autism and all the different things that can cause that. There's the whole medical aspect, but I don't want to leapfrog the idea that the economic part of it, because we got all these taxes and fees as well. It seems like the regulations, the taxes, the fees for just life are increasing as well, right? We have restricted freedom of travel. So if you want to fly somewhere, you're going to be harassed at the airport much more so. The toll roads, the highways, everything is becoming more pinned down and controlled. Then let's get into medicine, and then of course the whole medical cartel and pharmaceuticals in general, right? The way these drugs get you in a loop where you're dependent on the drug. It's managing your symptoms. If it is doing that, it's of course not curing your illnesses. It's just a very toxic approach to health, because it's not an approach to health. It's really an approach to lifelong drug use, which is what most people are facing today in America, right? Everybody has 20 pill bottles in their medicine cabinet. That's not normal. And on top of it, it's easier and easier to be arrested and to lose your freedom for violating all these intricate laws, all these things. And on top of it, people are more divided, distrustful, and disillusioned, disconnected from each other. And then you also have your surveillance, you got censorship, right? All these cameras everywhere. People are watching you. There's more of a lack of privacy, less of a sense of private property. This is reality today, and I'm honestly just scratching the surface. Now, the point is, it's not only the government is doing this to us, right? A lot of the things I mentioned, these are private corporations doing it, as opposed to government, which is a public corporation. And they're both corporations, right? They make money. It's not just one person running them. You can't really hold you. It's very tough to take them to court. Like, these are corporations, right? They're like business gangs. Um, and when we talk about psychology, though, there's no such thing as the government or corporations. This is why it's important to talk about psychology, because it's a whole different paradigm. In the psychological world, there's no such thing as all these entities that we recognize. It's just people doing this to people. And that's what's really going on in the real world. It's people that are manipulating, robbing, and abusing other people. So when people are manipulating, abusing, and robbing people on a mass scale, we have to look at their mindset and their emotional state when they're doing this. All right? And also the mindset and emotional state of their victims. Right? There are two parties here to look at. So the mindset of an abuser or of a criminal is that of dehumanizing the victim. They all do this. So dehumanizing meaning downplaying inside of their mind that person's humanity. They have to kind of justify it to themselves, right? There's all these justifications and excuses that it's okay for me to do this, to steal from them, to manipulate them, right? To lead them to their destruction. So seeing people as someone who's not really alive or somehow different than they are. And if you're looking at this, if you've been watching, listening to my show, you totally get, you're probably seeing in your head, oh, this is how they talk about us. This is what they think about us, the World Economic Forum and everything. They talk about us like cockroaches, like we got to manage the pests that are human beings. And indeed, this is what it is, not only on a societal level, but all criminals and abusers have this viewpoint of their victims. It's really just a lack of value for the life of a human being. It's a lack of regard for their value as a human being. And that happens on an individual street level. Like, especially if you, a lot of people watch true crime stuff about serial killers. You read their writings. These people who just hurt others, these sadists, these serial killers, the people that they hurt, or even mass shooters, very often there's like a racism, or if their victims are women, it's like a sexism towards their victims. There are all these writings about how much they disgust them. These people need to be removed. This is what these people talk about, right? When it's racially motivated, it's all the racist rhetoric. A lot of misogyny, a lot of the stuff against women. I mean, is there any shortage of these, serial killers and rapists, right, of women? And it's all this like perverted, sick view of them that, they're these horrible beings, and this is what needs to happen to them. If you really look at it on just an individual level, it is the same thing as on the societal level. And on the societal level, when we talk about the people that are, poisoning the crops, and they're doing all this processing, and big pharma doing all these things that are damaging people's health, their mindset is more organized. It's Satanism. And if you break Satanism down into its tenets, you get social Darwinism, right? This idea that people are just like animals, and these people that are born poor or born in these lower ranks of society, they need to just be controlled and bred out of existence, and these people that are born higher in society, they need to stick together, and then their lineage has to continue. And then this is actually, I just described eugenics as well, controlling breeding and breeding these people out of existence. It's the same idea. It's seeing people that they're not actually just a soul that incarnated, that has free will, and is a person that is just experiencing life just like them. It's a very divided view where these people are not as valuable. They're not even really human to them. It's a very dehumanizing view. That's on the societal level. So when people talk about the government or the deep state or the Illuminati, whatever, that is their mindset. But then also this is on another level, not just the individual, not just the societal, but on the worldview level. Meaning This is almost all of us that do this to some degree. We all have this mindset here and there, and to different degrees. So like, seeing, what I mean is seeing someone who in your worldview is kind of under you, seeing them as somebody who will never change, like an animal. Like, these people need to be treated a certain way, or they're just like that. They need to be maybe muzzled, maybe trained, or maybe just kept in a certain environment or kept on a certain schedule, right? So if we go deeper into this, I'd start connecting this to how many parents treat their children, how they raise their children, like an accessory to them, more like a pet, really. It's disgusting. Or just like a satellite to them, like where the parent is like the star, they're like the sun, and the child is just like revolves around them, and they're supposed to do what their parents do. We raise children like this, and that develops this mindset from young. And then when you grow up, you see other people this way, people that are not in your circle. You're going to see them in this kind of lower way. You may not be the one, of course, abusing them or hurting them, but that mindset is still seated there, and it is in the background. That mindset is weaved, intertwined into the fabric of what goes on in everyday life. But this example, the way it shows up very clearly every day, is how people view people in other parts of the world. There's so much of this. So a lot of people that are, for example, pro-Israel, these people that resonate with the Judeo-Christian culture, like, like, you may be amazed when you talk to them how they could be good people. They could, they could be great parents. They could be a good community. But when they talk about someone from another part of the world, it may shock you and amaze you how cold and inhumane they could be when speaking from people, say, from the Middle East, like Palestine. So even when we're talking like little innocent children, because this is their political, these are their political opponents, or maybe not so much that they're their political opponents, but that's the role they play in their worldview system. They're these people on the side. So it's like swatting a bug to them. There are a lot of people here in this country endorsing genocide because they just don't relate to those brown people over there in the Middle East. Like, that's what it is. I'm not one of these people crying racism, but let's be honest, that's what it is. You just don't see the humanity in those people. That's why it's no problem for you to support the foreign aid that goes to Israel. And the only problem that people have with foreign aid is that it's their money going there, unfortunately. But we're sending those bombs over there to kill civilians and children. But if there was a kid from the neighborhood, they would be crying. They would be so moved to help them. So where is this disconnect there? There's such a disconnect. And I kind of said this phrase, even more common is the way that people view their political opponents. Like, extreme progressives are going to see Trump as this spawn of hell. So if you give off the aura that you may have conservative viewpoints, that maybe you voted for Trump, in their mind, really it's an emotional thing, but in their head, they're seeing you as this person. They're already crossing you out as somebody that has a heart, or somebody that can even be reasoned with. You're done to them. But then, and it works the other way around. How do a lot of conservatives look at, say, a trans person? You know what I'm talking about. Out of touch with reality, right? There's a lot of ridicule, like a little side eye, even disgust, right? People are even disgusted at how a person like that looks. And I get that, but it's wrong to look at them like they're the ones that came up with the idea. Like, they're the ones pushing an ideology, right? Again, it just totally closes you off to the idea that that person was hurt and they were deceived, they were lied to, but they still have the power to change their life. They could change their life just like you could change your life. But that gets cut off because we think in terms of these, tribes and ideologies. So if that's somebody on their side, it's like the fan of an opposing team. At a football game, You're not even gonna. Actually, we're more civilized when at a football game people actually talk to each other, even if they're rooting for the opposite team. Anyway, the conclusion here is that violence and oppression can only happen when people don't care about other people being killed or hurt. Like, indifference is key to any kind of violence, any kind of abuse. So that's the state of this world and why it's messed up. It's the mindset of who cares about them? Who cares about them is the mindset. But many of us, we do care about human life. So many people actually care about others. They do. But we and they are way too quiet about it. Okay, so the mindset that dominates is this mindset of who cares about them. So that's the mindset of an offender. So what about the mindset of the victim? Because it's both of these. It takes two to tango. Both of these play a role. So the mindset of a victim is really the same mindset. It's just that one is now you're at the other end. You're at the end of the gun as opposed to being behind the trigger. But it's the same mindset, and the mindset is insignificance, meaning you're not significant, you're not important, you're not valuable enough to live undisturbed. Undisturbed. We get this mindset from at every age growing up, right? It's prepping us, it's preparing us to be a victim when we grow up. So starting with parents, the way when you grow up you have no privacy. Okay, I'm not saying a kid should have, obviously there's an area here you can't give a kid total privacy, but to a large degree you can. Certainly more than we give them now. Kids don't get enough respect. They don't get enough privacy. They don't get enough regard for being an independent human being. And that doesn't mean spoiling them. That doesn't mean they run your household. Absolutely not. Then in school you continue the same thing. You're totally you get everything, every possible message that tells you you're not important because there are 30 other kids in the class. It's all about you not disturbing the group, thinking about others, thinking about this other student, right? Nothing is about you, it's all about the group. Okay? No individual attention. Then as adults, we get the same thing now. We have to pay taxes, we have to participate in the world. Everybody's like a member of a community. Again, no emphasis on the individual. It's really the same mindset. It's the idea that one person can somehow get in the business of another. That it's okay for one person to get in somebody's business. And the proverbial statement that represents freedom, the statement that has been forgotten, is leave me alone. Leave me alone is an epic 3 words that society should be based on. The civilization is based on the words leave me alone. Once you lose leave me alone, you get the law of the jungle. You don't have civilization anymore. You got the jungle. But this is where it actually gets circular, because I can say leave me alone, and that should work to fight off criminals and bullies and killers in principle, if we could back those words up with actions that say leave me alone. You know what I mean? But the problem is, regardless, the problem is that we are alone. That's the problem. Everyone is separate in their world, in their own little world, and divided in front of their phones or in their house. Everybody's divided. We don't even know our neighbors. That's coming from me. I'm this kind of loner type that doesn't want to talk to neighbors. I'm definitely not the type to talk to people in an elevator. But that's the problem. A network is where strength is. A network of people, like fibers in a vine, when they're interlocking, right? They could be a thin little strand, but these thin little strands, it's like you could tie hairs together. Like one is so thin, and then you tie them together. This is where you have strength. And what this is like, I'm talking about a support system where people look out for each other. That's what a family unit is, first of all, and then a community, and then a nation, and then a civilization. This is what life is all about. And any person no matter how strong they are, no matter how smart they are, they could be deceived. You can be manipulated, and this is why we need loved ones to check in, to find out how we're doing, find out how the other person is doing, right? And this is coming from a rugged individualist who defends selfishness, okay? And I am a strong person. I don't depend on anyone. I don't need anyone. I can handle myself. But that's totally different than being in a vacuum, okay? I'm not in a vacuum. The strength of an individual, it does come from the fact that their energy is generated from within, right? You provide the fuel for your own engine. All your power comes from within, not from a group or an institution. Your identity is self-generated, right? Yes, that's where your strength comes from. It does. But where your strength manifests in the physical world, where it actually is in the physical world, is in relationships. So strong people are strong. Why? Because of how valuable they are, right? How much the people around them love and respect them, and how much they'll defend them, okay? So it's both. Yes, being strong and resilient is about handling things alone and without anyone's help, even in the worst, even by yourself. Being able to handle yourself, true, when it comes to molding your character and mastering yourself. But you can still be a master of your thoughts, emotions, and actions, and you could still just get overpowered. You can still be imprisoned. You could still be killed easily if you are outnumbered. So there's an entire social context here that is equally as important as the self. And strength is needed there too, in both. It is all about the self when we're talking about freedom and we're talking about philosophy, psychology. But to develop the self means to develop it in the real world, not just in your head, in the real world too. Facing the social context and facing the environment that you are living in. It's a respect for yourself and for the world. That's the key to development. That's the only way you can actually fully develop yourself. Because this society will disrespect you. And if you are constantly being ridiculed and laughed at and slapped around, you can master yourself to a large degree, but it's not enough. We deserve both. We can have both. This is our world. This is not Satan's world or anything like that. And people who prey on others, the first thing they do is they isolate the victim from their social group and their family. Isolation is the first technique of cult indoctrination. So when I say leave me alone, it doesn't mean I'm isolating. It means leave us alone and worry about yourself. See, we got to turn the selfishness back on them. They need to worry about themselves and leave us alone, because we are worried. We are focused on ourselves, not on being in somebody else's business. And we've already gone from talking about the mindset to talking about emotions. And that's how it should be, because thoughts can't really be separated from emotions. The way you think is going to influence the way you feel, the things you feel, and vice versa. Your feelings, okay, they're going to change the way you think. The thing is, it's going to change what you can even perceive in the world and what you can understand. There's such a thing as twisted logic. Like an alcoholic has a logic to them. A killer has a logic, that they have a logical justification. It doesn't mean it's true. And if we really peel back the layers, you can't separate anything, any part of it from anything. It's all tied together. Our actions and our living circumstances influence our thoughts and emotions, and our thoughts and emotions influence the actual world we live in and the actions that we take. If we keep getting impulses to do a certain thing, sooner or later we will take that action. It's all connected. But the emotions are the most neglected of all when it comes to studying and talking about the aspects of life. And I'm not the first person to discover this, but it can't be said loudly enough. So that's why I'm talking about this. Our lives are getting worse. Suffering is increasing in the world. We are destroying the planet. We are losing our spirit. All these things are happening, and it's all because of these emotional traumas, these emotional wounds that need to be healed. Inferiority that we get from when we're children, parents comparing us, telling us, that it's not just parents, not everybody's parents, but generally adults tell children that they compare them to others. This person's better than you, this kid is smarter than you, why can't you be more like your brother, right? And then that manifests as compensation, right? Compensation goes hand in hand with inferiority. This is why people grow up and they hear those voices in their head from their childhood. So if they said, why can't you be like your brother, he's so much smarter. These are the people that go get a master's degree, and they join the biggest institution, and they get this job, and their whole identity becomes this job, because they are still trying to heal that wound that they thought they weren't good enough there as that person they were being compared to. Or these are the kind of people that join the army, right? Join the army that to be this kind of heroic person that they thought their parents wanted them to be, right? Then you have fear of rejection. This kind of fear that if I don't fit in with the way society thinks, or the way that this person thinks, this popular person that I want to be like, that I won't get a partner, or I won't be accepted. So people really just sacrifice all of their personality, all of their individuality to do that, because rejection is such a great scary thing, right? It doesn't feel good. Then we got all this guilt. We got guilt and shame that we're destroying the planet. They tell us that we're endangering others. Like during the pandemic, everybody was endangering their grandma, right? This is what they tell us, that we're weighing down society, so we got to pay taxes because there's a social contract, right? This is what they tell us. It's all fake. Nobody goes into this world with guilt and shame. I just got flashbacks of talking with Judeo-Christians about original sin, right? And coming into this world somehow being guilty. Shame that we're not good enough, right? That we need to repent for something we didn't even do. And it's the same thing again and again. It's this idea that I'm not good enough to live undisturbed. And whether you know it or not, this is deep in the subconscious of almost everyone to some degree, right? Some more than others. It's this idea that this is how the world always was, and this is how it always will be. Like, we've all heard that, right? Even if you explain to them, like, yes, the world's messed up, we are in slavery, but this is how it always has been. Or, it was good enough for my parents and my grandparents, so why wouldn't it be good enough for me? Well, we need to be bold and say it's not good enough for me. I deserve better, right? People turn away from love, from goodness, from beautiful things. They turn away from it because somewhere deep down they feel like it's not for them, for whatever reason. For whatever reason, we so often feel like good things just don't happen to us. Unfortunately, good-hearted people think like this. Narcissists think good things should be happening to them all the time. Yeah, it's upside down because of this is how trauma works. So because we think that good things don't happen to us, we stay in toxic environments, we stay in toxic habits, we keep doing things like that. We repeat behaviors that lead to our own destruction. Why? Because the scariest thing to do in the world is not to like jump into a burning building or something like that. It's actually to start treating yourself better day in and day out, little by little. Don't stop hurting yourself. It's the hardest thing to do. How? By learning, putting some time to grow yourself, eating well, exercising, sleeping enough, ending relationships that make you feel drained, and then letting your worst fears, your worst emotions flow through you actually, and just letting them go. Those are not the only things, but that's what I thought of, that like day in and day out work. That's the hardest thing to do. And when you do that, you probably have done that, and what happens is you feel all this resistance. Like every cell in your body is telling you to give up and go back to what you've always done, to what you're used to. But it's really a trick. This is how trauma works. We've all been traumatized, not only in our own lives, Not everybody's been traumatized in our own lives, even though I think just going to school is trauma in itself. Uh, the situations we've been put in. And to a certain degree, trauma is unavoidable living in the world, but not the way that we do it, not the way that it goes on in the world today. We're traumatized not only in our own lives, but as a family lineage and human species. I talked last week, or the week before, about generational trauma and the way through the DNA it can actually epigenetically get passed down. And as a species, we're traumatized. Not only as a species, the planet is traumatized. The entire living system of the planet. And trauma gets us stuck in a loop that keeps destroying and keeps consuming. It's a self-destructive loop. And the loop can only be broken by facing the fact that what happened to us was wrong. It didn't make sense. It wasn't because of us. It was just wrong. There is no meaning to it there. It was just wrong. So when we do that, the way to cure that, the cure to that is admitting it was wrong, so that we will no longer punish and destroy ourselves the way that we were punished and destroyed. That is the answer to solving all the problems in the world, because it's happening to all kinds of different people in the world. It's happening to all of us. And it's not just happening to us, we're doing it to each other. It's wrong what is happening in the world now, and it was wrong what we did, either directly or what we supported indirectly through our silence. Okay, that's it. That's a quick one this week, and I'll end it there. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.